Welcome to The Impact Effect, hosted by conscious leadership expert Tom Eddington, advisor to some of the world's most successful companies and CEOs, where each week we help executives, entrepreneurs, and organizers become more effective leaders while growing businesses that are making an impact in the world. And now, here's Tom.
Hi, welcome to the Impact Effect Network, a place where we discuss making business matter through conscious leadership. I'm Tom Eddington. My guest today is Rose Fernandez, CEO of Algenist. Welcome, Rose. I'd like to start by just talking about conscious leadership. So when I say the term or the words conscious leadership, what does that mean for you?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is a bit of a journey, because it's been a bit of a journey for me. But what it really means to me is being present to where I am in my mind with my team and leading with that thought of how I show up and how I interact with people and setting context for them and in a way that they can see how I'm experiencing something and hopefully inspiring them to take that same approach. But it's also, I think, for me, allowing people to be who they are and meet them where they're at and kind of bring them along in the journey with me and allowing them to make mistakes and test things and make their own decisions. But really acting as a guide as often as possible, which, can be hard. Sometimes you want to step in and take over, and I'm sure I do that at times, especially if something's going to go terribly off the rails. But most of the time, things work themselves out. So, and people learn faster that way. So that's kind of what it means for me.
Well, let's talk about your journey. When you and I first met, you were working for Jurleek. You were head of sales.
Yeah.
And then you left there and went to work for Algenist to be head of sales and marketing, and then moved into the CEO role about a year ago. So just tell me a little bit about your journey and what that's been like for you.
So if I recall, my very first conversation with you was in it was in a cabin, and I think we may have been at Sundance. And I was really struggling. I was struggling with a lot of contemplating like what I wanted to do with my career, whether or not I was in the right place, how I was kind of interacting with my team and the business. And I popped up on a bar stool in this cabin, and you were sitting there, and we started talking. And then the next thing I knew, we were on a hike the next morning, and I was like, "Oh my God, I love this man." And it's funny. I think I shared this with you, but it's one of my favorite stories. I came back from that. It was a board retreat with Green Spot Network while I was at Jurleek. But I came back from that retreat, and I sat down, and my husband asked, how was the trip? And I said, "Oh my God, it was amazing." And he said, "Tell me about it." And I said, "Well, I met this man." And he was like stone cold looking at me like, what is she about to tell me? And I didn't really get it until I could see. He was like, "Okay." And then I told him about our conversation and that, you practice conscious leadership, and I was really inspired by our conversation. He looked like he just like the entire weight of the world had, been lifted off of his shoulders. And when I hear myself say that now, I think, "Oh my God, Rose, what were you thinking?" Like, I met this man. I've been gone for a week and I met this man. So that was my first real interaction with you. And I was just really inspired by the way that you interacted with the board and guided us through some difficult conversations, and spent time with you. And I think, was able to be real about who I am and what my struggles were, and have gotten great guidance and found my way to Algenist. And then we were able to work in a more, I think, cohesive manner since I've been here, because it was not as cohesive, consistent in the beginning. And I think it's been very, very helpful to me in the last year in particular, in the way that, I engage with the team and some of the practices that I've put into place, and how we work as an organization, I think is largely impacted by the work that you and I have done together. And I'm just always inspired by the team and our conversations, and seeing how that comes to fruition. I think I was sharing with you that it cracks me up to walk by someone's office and I can hear someone saying, because it's an approach of mine, is, I'll come with you, but you better have a plan B. And so it's nice to see that, I have leaders that are willing to allow people to own their work and to own their decisions, and that are helping to guide them to learning and developing the business. Like I said, unless something's going to go off the rails terribly badly, like, it's always best to let people work through. I think it's the best way.
Yeah, so just going back to that conversation when we met at the GSN board retreat, two of the qualities I think about with regard to conscious leadership, one is being present, another is to create a safe and trusting environment. Yep. And as a leader, those are two of our responsibilities, is how do we make it safe for people to be vulnerable, to be able to share what they're dealing with, what's going on for them, and be open and willing to share. And can you just talk a bit about that and how you've been on that journey and the evolution you've gone through and becoming more of a conscious leader?
I mean, I think, over time I've learned that my biggest role or responsibility is to provide context for people, mm-hmm. and to be as open. Transparency is very important. And so that's something that I continually talk with the team about, and I'll even, add a disclaimer often that it's like, I'll tell you anything I legally can. And if I can't, I'll tell you that I can't share this part with you. Yeah. And it's taken a little bit of time, because I think some people don't trust that you're actually being transparent. So you have to be consistent with your transparency in the good and the bad. But taking a direct approach, being vulnerable, allowing people to see you make mistakes, and owning your mistakes, and even one of the things I like to do is kind of talk through how it fell off the rails, so that people can see what went wrong and what was my thinking, and in the beginning, I think people were a little bit surprised. Like, I could see some of my team was a little bit shocked, where I'd be like, oh, that was a mistake. I shouldn't have made that decision. This and this and this has happened. And now when we start to have those conversations, it's a very natural way for someone to take responsibility for something that didn't go well. And then they already have kind of an action for what we should do to go forward. But I think it goes back to those things. It's context, it's, trust, transparency, being direct, and holding people accountable, but always in a safe space, like always in a place where people feel like they can make those mistakes, or they can say, I don't know. I'm a big fan of, I say this a lot, especially before, like when we're doing our board rehearsals, I'm like, don't punt. Like, because if you punt, I got to come in after you, and that's not great for anybody.
Right.
It's always better to just say, that's a great question, and we'll get you the information, or I don't know. Like, there's nothing wrong with saying I don't know, and I don't know why people think they have to have all answers at all times. I mean, we're not computers.
Right.
So.
I'm glad you mentioned context. When we look at the landscape of the world today for business in particular, there's so much uncertainty, there's so much volatility, there's so much change, and it's really scary. It's really hard for people working in organizations. And as leaders, that's one of our responsibilities, to create that context, to let people know when you don't know, to let them know what you do know. Yep. And your job as CEO is constantly looking around the corner and trying to make your best assessment of what's going on. Can you talk about Algenist and the volatility, the change that's happening, and what you're doing as a CEO to help try and create that context for folks?
Yeah, I mean, I try and over communicate. It's been an evolution for me. I used to think that I communicated well and I gave enough information, but it's become very apparent that, like, I need to say things multiple times in multiple forums to multiple people. And, sometimes I just kind of walk the floor. We have a big office, and we'll just lean over and see what someone's working on, and I'll use that opportunity sometimes to deliver a message, because I know that, people they work in groups and it gets shared. So I just think that it's important to over communicate. We have a monthly connect meeting. It's basically a town hall. I just don't like to call it that because it sounds so formal and people get nervous about showing up. And town hall for me, personally, like, has this context of just information overload, one direction of information. And so that changes all the time. We've changed the format so that we don't really show a lot of numbers. Like, it's kind of TED Talk-ish. We've got pictures. It's inspiring, but we're delivering the financials. We're giving the state of how the business is, how we're doing against our budgets, where we have gaps, risks that are coming up. We invite different people from different departments to speak, dependent on what's happening in the business. And I'll share, we had a pretty big distribution change last year, and in that decision, I used that forum to bring in the team, the entire corporate team of 25 people, because people need to understand why you're making this kind of a decision and what does this mean for us. And one of the things I was really present to is that removing myself, me understanding what was happening, the first thing people are going to worry about are like, what does this mean for my job? Or what is the business sound, or what's happening? So I was able to actually illustrate, here's where we are. This is where we're going. It's going to take this long to get here. By the way, it's going to be a little bumpy between here and here. But when we get to this time, we're going to be golden. And so far, that's kind of been the trajectory. And so I just try to have those kinds of conversations. And I'm not afraid to anymore say, like, it's going to be a little bumpy. Like, it's going to be a little rough. We're going to have to work really hard. But in balancing that, I think I give people a lot of room. And I'm really proud that I'm in the role that I'm in, and that I'm able to kind of create, again, that context and that environment. So, we work really hard, and we're private equity owned. So not only do we work really hard, but we push really hard. And at the level that we're in, we drive innovation. That's the name of the game. Like, that's what we're here for. We're here to, if you're on this team, it's because you get excited about, like, what's the next magical Imagineering thing that you can come up with. And that requires people to be all in. And that can get tiring. And so we try and create an environment where people have permission to take a break. We don't have really set office hours. I can tell you that almost every person on my team works a minimum of 10 hours a day. Everyone, no matter what level, they work from home 1 day a week. I think it's important. I mean, lives are busy. People have other responsibilities. I don't really believe that there's this, like, separate life work thing that happens. So it's got to all fit. And then, we shut early on Fridays. We're shut at 2 because, and the reality is this, honestly, like, most of my team's still working till 4 or 5, but they have the room that if they needed to do something, I never want people to feel like they got to ask for permission to move. And because we're not asking them for permission all along the way when we're pushing. So it's got to be a two-way, and I think that creates again a safe space, because people can say, I'm tired, or I'm going to work from home today. I've got some stuff with my kids, and then you start to see people really embracing the work really hard, be all in, and then be all in at home too. Like, when you're there, be there, and when you're here, be here. But this I had someone ask me once, how do you describe work-life balance? And I started to laugh. I was like, okay, so first of all, you just asked me, a woman CEO, this question. Like, that doesn't exist, like, for anybody. But women in generally, tend to take on a lot of extra things at home just naturally, just caregivers and nurturers. So the balance thing, I got rid of that a long time ago. And now you got to do something that you love, so that it just flows with your life.
Right.
And you've got to be with people that you trust and that are with you. And if you can find that environment, or you can create that environment, that's magical.
So let's talk about that. You clearly, when you are letting people essentially pick their own hours to go home early, you're saying, I trust you.
Correct.
And you're engendering a tremendous amount of trust. And that's inconsistent with most workplaces. It's inconsistent with how most organizations operate. They're still coming out of that industrial model where it's about the throughput. You show up, you clock in, you clock out at breaks, you clock out at the end of the day. How did you get to that point, and how did you create that level of trust and allow people to say, I'm doing my work, I understand what I'm supposed to do, and I'm glad that I've got a boss that trusts me?
I mean, I think first you have to be really clear on what the business objectives are, and people need to understand those, right? So you want them to have clear goals, what needs to be achieved, so that you can measure and you can check, because it is a business. But I've always had most of my career has been a commercially focused role, and commercial heads work from anywhere.
Right.
And no one's checking, right? Because you either deliver or you don't.
Right.
And I think that was probably my first foray into work can be done this way. I've been really fortunate to work for people that tend to live more mindfully. I worked for Dr. Murad for a long time. And he was probably one of the first, if you will, doctors, dermatologists talking about wellness and cultural stress and things of that nature. So he was very in tune with, if you need to take a nap, go take a nap. I actually had keys to the sixth floor aesthetic room because I would go take a nap because he caught me like my head on my desk one day. I was like, I'm exhausted. And I've always worked for people who had this kind of mantra of if I can't trust you, you can't work for me.
Right.
And that's just kind of been part of my DNA as I've developed in my career, and that's been my approach. Obviously, over time, through practicing conscious leadership and understanding more in depth what that means for me as a person, it's allowed for me to balance that a little bit more. But everything works itself out, and if someone's not doesn't want to be there and they're not contributing, then they work themselves out.
Right.
And one person doesn't ruin a whole group.
Right.
So I'm really proud to say that I've got a pretty invested bunch of people, and they all work really hard, and they are proud of what they do. So they show up, and we measure, and we make our targets.
So when you stepped into the CEO role, you and I had some early conversations about organization culture, and you have created this culture. How long would you say it took you to for people to realize what kind of culture you were trying to drive? When did you start seeing the behavior change and people exhibiting the kinds of behaviors that were consistent with the culture that you're talking about, where they trusted you and they felt like they had permission to do their best work?
I mean, those that worked with me closely already were in. They were like, thank God, hallelujah. But those that didn't, I think were a little skeptical. Like, do I need to send her an email and tell her I'm coming in at 10? And I just kept, anytime that behavior happened, I just flicked it back and was like, I don't need to know this unless there's a problem.
Right.
And I just was consistent in that communication. And I was consistent with my communication. So I had no problem telling people, hey, I'm going to be out tomorrow. I'm taking my daughter to do X. And I think all in, so I've been CEO now just a year and a half, something like that. It probably took a good year, honestly, for everyone to get it. I still have a couple that are still want to tell me that they're going to be 30 minutes late because of the freeway. I'm like, yeah, it's LA. We have traffic. I'm not surprised. And I think that's just them, that's who they are as people. And that's what they need to feel safe and comfortable. And I can only continue to reinforce and hopefully get them to see that it's good.
Right.
But I would say it took about a year.
Yeah.
It took a year. A lot of repeating myself, a lot of reinforcing. It's the policy. Like, this is how we work. Actually, we just had a meeting, brand conference, and one of my regionals changed the start time. We were going to start at 9:30 because we have people out at dinner the night before. They're out having dinner, having fun, and he changed the agenda to 8. And I was like, absolutely not. And I said, and I wasn't even going to be there. I said no. And I said, you don't understand. Like, you have to provide context for people.
Right.
You sent out an agenda. The meeting was started at 9:30. You have them at dinner until 9:30 or 10. They got to pack up, and now they got to be here by 8 o'clock. And he said, well, we're really tight. I said, this is not a culture that I'm on board with.
Right.
This is not how we operate. We sent out an agenda, and people need room in the morning to get ready and show up and be present and not be worried about, like, I need to pack my suitcase. I didn't get to sleep. I'm like, these guys aren't even going to get 6 hours of sleep. Like, and you expect them to sit in a room all day and listen to you? And I literally said to him, you've already made the decision, and you made the change. But I want you to know that this is not how we engage. And I popped in the next day, and he changed the meeting back to 9:30, and they started at 9:30. And I got a few emails of like, thank God. But I mean, I think that's a great example.
Yeah.
Like, don't surprise people.
Yeah.
You're watching the Impact Effect Network. Who you are is how you lead. Conscious leadership is an intuitive, intentional process requiring an open heart, an open mind, and a committed desire to fully own how you show up in the world. If you're a CEO, a solopreneur, or a community leader, Tom Eddington's ebook helps you amplify your strengths, making you the best version of yourself. Download the ebook today and become a part of bringing conscious leadership to the planet.
Can you share just a little bit about the journey of this last year and a half as CEO?
Yeah.
What that's been like?
It's been wild. So there's that saying, right? You don't know what you don't know.
Yes.
And you
were reminded of that.
I was regularly. I was really fortunate to work alongside Frederick Stockel, who was the CEO prior, and now I can refer to him as a beloved friend, and he sits on our board. So I kind of learned the ropes through him, and we worked together really closely. So I had insight into what I had insight to, right? Like I knew how the financials ran. I knew how to interact with the board. I understood the team and all of the personalities. But then there was these things that, like, the first couple of months, I had no idea how much time CEOs spend on legal, like that. Like I knew that there was some, but just making like everything from clinicals to labor, like you name it, taxes. Like I literally at one point was like, this is the part of the job that's not my favorite part. And then I think the other part that was really a surprise to me is that you are in this business 100% of the time.
Yes.
As a CEO, so as an SVP of sales, you work hard, you're pulling a lot of hours, but you bounce out, you're out. As a CEO, that never happens. Right. And I think what was a headset change for me probably 6 months into it is that's a beautiful thing. It wasn't a burden. It just became this, like, I was always thinking about how could we do that better, or that's really cool. How can we make something to serve that need? Or how can we evolve our, social channels to do X, or these, like, it just never ever stops. And then about 3 months post that enjoyment, I was like, okay, but we've got to structure this. This is intense. And then that became kind of getting back, and probably getting into, not even so much back, but getting into, like, practicing when it was time for me to kind of quiet the noise and either think about nothing, which was new for me, I don't think I've ever not thought about nothing. But getting to a place where in the work that we've done together, where someone can say to me, what are you thinking about? And I like the biggest smile, nothing. Or knowing that like I need to remove myself so that I can think through something, whether that's strategy or personal. And I've been able to understand the difference. But, I've tried really hard to start my morning with it bare minimum, because sometimes, so you probably know this, I've probably shared this with you, Tom, but like if I have 30 minutes before I have to leave, I will lay in bed until the last 15. And then then it's like, go. That 15 that I'm kind of lingering in bed, I try and think about, like, I try and listen to like what's happening outside, like take in a moment, listen to the birds. And I have my dogs, and so I kind of appreciate somebody snoring for a minute, and I'm grateful, just grateful for the day, and it's beautiful, and think about kind of how I want that day to be, like what's the big priority, and then I hustle. And then I say that because I wish, and maybe someday I'll get there where I like get up and I meditate and I'm up at 4:30, like I read every other CEO is, and they have all this time in the morning before they go into the office. These very magical people that I've never met, but
probably don't exist.
But generally, I do the same thing every day, like it's new. I'm sure I drive my family insane, but I'm like, I gotta go in 15 minutes. I'm in a hurry. Like I've been in a hurry every day forever, because I do like to lay in bed and kind of just, I guess, kind of come into the day. Yeah.
So a couple of things I want to make sure that we talk about today. So when you look back over this time as CEO, what are some lessons that you've learned that you'd want to make sure other new CEOs, particularly women, could benefit from? What are some things that would be really helpful for them?
I mean, some of these things I've learned now, some of them I learned from a prior CEO and then was able to kind of put them into practice. But, I think as a woman CEO, any CEO, honestly, but as a woman, you just need to be really confident in your decisions, and you need to own them. And you don't need to apologize for them. You don't need to give foundation. You don't need to, explain away, like, this is the decision. And then you need to make sure that you bring others along with you in that decision.
Yep.
But I think that's a really meaningful one. And I see it a lot. Like I see it in boardrooms where women will start with, I have this idea. It might be crazy. Okay. Like that wasn't necessary. Because, men don't generally deliver information that way. Right. I think the other thing, just as a woman leader, like don't do anything once that you're not willing to do a second time. And I'll just give you a simple, like, if you're not willing to reply every day at 9 p.m. when someone is contacting you, then don't start that.
Right.
Be very, very, what I have learned in this time is that I need to be very protective of my time. It's amazing how many people want your time.
Yep.
And for different reasons. Some people want, visibility. Some people want guidance. Some people don't know what they want, but they feel like they're supposed to meet with you. And so I've just gotten brutal about what my calendar looks like. In general, I don't take meetings are generally not more than 30 minutes because I figure anything more than that, we're hanging out. Like, I don't know what we're doing after 30 minutes. And we can generally get through pretty important things in 15 minutes, especially if people come prepared and there's been pre-work that's been done. And then the other thing that I have learned is that it is really important for me to connect with people, not meet with people. That's different.
Right.
But connect with people. So I try and float around, like I said, on the floor. I try and remember and things that are important, maybe events or things that have come up. And I don't just do the FaceTime, like, I may text message you and send you some information or a note or a thank you or I'm thinking of you. But I think connecting with people is really important. I mean, I think those are like the big lessons, and it's just creating space for space to think, because if you respond to everything, you don't have an opportunity to think.
Right.
And you're, as a CEO, you get you're a strategy. You get paid to think, so you actually need time to think. And I think those were some big lessons. I think there's always blind spots, and it just depends. But if you've got the right people on your team, and you trust, and they know that you trust them, and they're doing what they should be doing, then they're watching with you.
Right.
And so those blind spots aren't so it's such a burden.
Yep.
So I'm pretty also committed to making sure I have the right people on the team. And that was a lesson this year for me, and I feel like the team that we have right now is the best, and they're all very invested, and we make jokes, but like they will jump out of a plane with me, and that means a lot to have people like that around you.
Right.
You're watching the Impact Effect Network, the world's first 24-hour on-demand business and leadership video and podcast network, bringing conscious leadership to a global audience.
So I would be remiss if I didn't talk about your time in New York a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, thank you.
Can you talk about Women's Wear Daily and your time in New York and the speech you were able to deliver?
Yeah, so Women's Wear Daily is our foremost trade organization. And when I first came into this business, I used to read Women's Wear Daily like it was the Bible. So it gives you all of the business information, retail, financial, clothing, beauty. And my biggest, I've always thought about, if I could achieve something, what would be a big marker for me? And it's always been to be on the cover of Women's Wear Daily, right? And they've been really great in a lot of ways throughout my career, and I've worked on some great brands, obviously, to help with that. But I was invited by Jenny Fine, who's the editor, and she invited me to do the Beauty Summit. She wanted me to speak at the Beauty Summit on Algenist innovation, which is a huge coup. Not a lot of people make it to that stage, even less so, female Latina CEO. So I was really, really excited. And was also really excited to share the story of Algenist, and because it's one that I don't think a lot of people know. And I spent a lot of time practicing, how I would deliver the information, because to me that was important, and it goes back again to context, like meeting people where they are, what they're willing to hear. And I wanted it to be fun and engaging, but I also, we have a pretty hardcore biotech background, so I wanted to get credit for that. And so at 15 minutes, I think I went exactly 14:11, and was able to really get, biotechnology, algae, and our, ingredient level innovation out there. But a learning for me in that process was that I, trust for myself. Like, I talk a lot about trust for other people and how that's important. But that was a big test for me because, I went up there with I had no script. There were no cue cards. I didn't stand behind a podium, and I just owned my content. And when I got up there, I looked out onto the people that were in the room, and there was 450, CEOs and VP and above from large CPGs. And I just thought to myself, everyone here in this business, in my entire career, has always wanted to see each other succeed. These people are here to listen to me talk about this, and they just want to hear the story. So that provided some comfort. And then I said, and you know what you know, so just tell the story. And so I trusted myself, and it was really comfortable. I was really proud to be up there, but I had fun. And that's been a lot for me in the past probably 3 or 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
And that is like, if you're not having fun, then you shouldn't be doing this.
Right.
But it was fun. And it was fun. And then when I came off the stage, my team was there, and our chairman of the board, Rich Gersten, was there, and he was really pleased. And Margarita Aragata, who was the chief merchant at Sephora, who I looked up to this day, and she sits on our board now, which I'm really fortunate for. But she came as my guest, and that was really touching to me. This woman that ran Sephora for years wanted to come see me speak, and I was just so grateful to be surrounded again by people that I can trust, and
right.
that are demonstrating love, and in a business,
right.
And I don't think I have friends in other sectors, and I just don't hear that often. But in beauty, I feel like people we want each other to win.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of support there. And I think that's kind of why I stayed in this business. When I first discovered it in my early 20s, I remember thinking, wow, there's all these really smart women running these businesses, and I like this, and I'm good at it, and I can probably have a career here. And so that's been interesting. And I never in a million years thought that I would be a CEO, by the way. That wasn't on my radar just yet. Maybe in the future, but
right.
But Women's Wear Daily was really very, very meaningful for us, for me, for the brand, for the team. The team was so excited. I mean, they blew up our Instagram stories. It was every other picture was either of me on stage or go girl boss. It was, it was really wonderful. And I got so many emails from people, other women CEOs, that were like, you did a great job. That was really amazing. And, great story. And a couple of them, which I was happy to see, actually called out that, they were really pleased to see that I brought in the rest of the team into
right.
that presentation,
right.
that I showed the team, one of them wrote, it was really refreshing to see a CEO get up there and it wasn't all about the CEO.
Right.
And I feel blessed, I feel blessed that I can share that, and that I have this, nothing gets done with one person.
Right.
So, I mean, the presentations that took, probably 20 people to pull together that presentation. I just had the honor of delivering it.
Right.
So that was a really, really special moment. And we've had some really great press post that from, other trades that want to know about what we're doing, because we've been able to do some really cool stuff. We've just went 100% vegan formulation, which was really important to me. And we weren't doing anything too, dreadful, by the way. We had a milk protein in a product, and we found a way to use a sugar ferment, and that allowed us to have 100% vegan formulations at that point. But biotechnology it allows you to do that kind of stuff. And that's really important. And, ingredients are important. That's the name of the game in this business. And I've got a VP of PD that just gets googly-eyed over the next thing that she wants to play with. And those are people you want to spend time with.
Right.
You're watching the Impact Effect Network. Is your team tuned out? Are you looking for a powerful speaker to motivate and inspire your organization? Then Tom Eddington is the choice for keynote speaker at your next conference or event. Tom is one of the most sought-after business advisors and coaches in Silicon Valley. For over 2 decades, Tom has advised world-renowned CEOs and executives on how to catapult their organization's success, including Hewlett-Packard, NBNA Corporation, and Royal Dutch Shell. In his dynamic keynotes, Tom offers fresh new paradigms on how to create healthier, happier, and more purposeful workplaces while navigating change and generating higher degrees of success for organizations. For information on booking Tom at your next event, contact eddingtonadvisory.com.
You've said it in your own words, but there's only life. There's no such thing as work-life balance.
Correct.
It's just, there's only life, and you've chosen to live the life that you're living, and you're leading from that place. And I think it's a wonderful example for others in the workplace to look to you as a role model.
Oh, thank you. It's I was sharing with you. It's a really kind of peaceful place to be, because it's just life, and you just move through it,
Right.
and everything is as it's supposed to be, and there's lessons along the way, and it's not always easy, and sometimes it's tough, but that's what's supposed to be happening right now, and things work themselves out. I know that sounds kind of magical, but things work themselves out.
They do. Well, thanks for being on the show today, Rose. It was absolutely a pleasure to have you here and to be in this conversation together. So thank you. And thank you for what you're doing in the world.
Oh, thanks, Tom. I mean, honestly, I practice daily, but it's a really wonderful journey.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you.
You're watching the Impact Effect Network. Thank you for joining Tom Eddington on the Impact Effect. Visit impacteffectnetwork.com to connect with Tom and discover additional episodes featuring today's top leaders making a global impact through conscious leadership in the world today.